also in our industry, in architecture, what I hear a lot from the firms we've brought in and others that we're talking to is there's somewhat of a comfort level that the company's being run by financially oriented people because the architects are, most of them are not financially oriented as a primary skill set, and we don't want them to be. They're designers, they're artists. There's a healthy balance that's needed, and that's sort of what we bring, to the table from the leadership standpoint. And it's looked upon as a good thing because there's some foundation and grounding in the numbers, and the numbers are important.
Hey, welcome to the Beyond the Deal podcast, where we delve into the intricate world of mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance, and the critical forces shaping the future of middle market companies. I'm your host, Michael Fisher, Managing Director of DBD Investment Bank, located in New York City. Today on the show, we have Joe Furey, CEO of Michael Graves and Associates. Michael Graves and Associates is a globally known and respected architectural firm headquartered in Princeton, New Jersey. We are going to first get to know Joe and Michael Graves and Associates a little better, and then discuss what is going on in the architectural industry. Finally, we are going to dive into the acquisition strategy that Joe and the Michael Graves team have been executing over the past several years. Thank you for joining us, and let's go beyond the deal. What's going on, Joe?
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
It's always good to see you. I was trying to think before we jumped on how long it is that you and I have known each other now, and we're getting close to probably a decade sooner or later then. And
Yeah.
I always every time I think of you, I don't want to bust your chops too hard, but I remember the first time that I met you when I was a commercial banker. I introduced myself and you said, "I already have a bank. I'm not interested." And I was just like, "Hey, I was just trying to introduce myself.
That is so blown out of proportion. That's like, me telling football stories from college. I think you
Okay.
blew that out of proportion, but it's all
All
good.
right.
We got to the
Well,
same
it's
place.
funny now. I didn't think when I first met you, I didn't think that I would like you so much, and now you're one of my dear friends. So I just think it's hilarious how far we've come in almost 10 years together.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. It's been almost that. I think 2017, I think.
yeah, for those who don't know Michael Graves and the company, can you kind of give us a little bit of the history and evolution of the company?
Sure. So Michael founded the company back in 1964, was teaching at Princeton University, teaching architecture, and quickly became a thought leader in the industry, and with several others, most of whom I think started their practice. But Michael's practice sort of took off in the 70s and quickly became a world-renowned firm delivering architecture, interiors, master planning, but then also the product line division. And our that business goes on. Our they just had a big launch recently as well. And Michael became like the Target line was what really, I guess, made him a household name. Although, he was, we were doing big name projects around the world on the architecture front as well. And about, let's see, 2003, I believe it was, before my time with Michael Graves. Michael had an illness, became paralyzed, and um, that sort of begun some of the succession planning of the firm, but not in a uh, really organized manner. I joined the firm in 2008 as the CFO and quickly realized there was more to my job than just being the CFO. And a lot of that was bringing the shareholders agreement and the whole succession plan to a conclusion so that the firm was set up to go beyond Michael. There was a lot of negotiations in that and everything, and that really, that background and frankly those documents literally were the foundation for the acquisition strategy. Now, along the way, we had done strategic planning, and for a number of reasons, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later, the acquisition strategy was really the right thing to do, leveraging the brand going forward. And Michael passed in 2015. And shortly thereafter, I had the opportunity to invest in the architecture business, and and take it forward. It took a little bit of time, as you know, a little organic growth, then COVID, and then we came back together, um, and got things rolling with you.
So you've been a CFO your entire, like, where did you start out your career and everything?
So interestingly, well, let me back up. I was a political science major because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Realized I couldn't afford to do that. I had to get a job, and was somehow lucky enough to get a job at Yankee Stadium in accounting. Knew absolutely nothing. The guy hired me, said, "I'll teach you whatever you need to know." From there, I went back to school, took all the accounting work, took the CPA exam, got licensed and all that. So from there, yeah, I had a career in, from the bottom in accounting and finance all the way up to the CFO role. And then when with the opportunity to buy into to Graves was when I officially took the CEO title.
I just always think it's interesting because you always seem like way too outgoing to be this, like, kind of bookworm
The
accountant,
goober
right?
goober accountants, yeah. You gotta
Yeah.
have a little of that skill. I do, and those people are important too. But yeah, they focus on what they focus on, and you got to be beyond the numbers a little bit. When making deals. Not everything is whatever you put in that spreadsheet. You stick to that deal, and if you're that rigid, you're gonna have a hard time getting deals done, and there won't be good deals, in my opinion. But you got to have some level of flexibility.
So you shared how you went from CFO to CEO, but I always feel like that gave you like a little bit of an extra skill set that most people don't have because you're not just, driving down to your CFO, hey, these are the numbers we want to hit. This is what we want to do. You actually have some backing behind you to kind of know what's going on. So do you
Yeah.
really, it must be, I think it's probably very useful that you were a CFO before you became a CEO.
I think it is. And what's interesting too is my team. So our COO had CFO experience, Sean Camo, and we worked together. He's a little younger than me, had the same first job at Yankee Stadium that I had, and we were fortunate enough to recently bring in Mark Pizzariello, who retired a year or so ago, got bored, and we were able to pull him out of retirement as our CFO. So um, he and Mark was my first boss. He's the guy who hired me with no experience. Said, "I'll teach you what you need to
Full
know."
circle,
So
full
yeah, full
circle.
circle. And so then there's that level of trust there as well. So in addition, you see, you have three of us that have a very similar skill set in that, but we have a level of trust. We can divide and conquer when we're busy with things, and I can roll up my sleeves and do something. But also in our industry, in architecture, what I hear a lot from the firms we've brought in and others that we're talking to is there's somewhat of a comfort level that the company's being run by financially oriented people because the architects are most of them are not financially oriented as a primary skill set, and we don't want them to be. They're designers, they're artists. There's a healthy balance that's needed, and that's sort of what we bring, to the table from the leadership standpoint. And it's looked upon as a good thing because there's some foundation and grounding in the numbers, and the numbers are important.
That's a good point that you bring up, and I'd love for you to kind of, I know this, but right, for the listeners to get into this a little bit. Well, when Michael was alive, right? There's a lot of like things that happened where it's just like a ton of business getting, driven in because of him. And it was like, okay, we didn't have to worry too much about the top line because the money was just, and opportunities were just there. But then as things transitioned, right, it was really important to have that financial acumen. Do you want to just get into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, and it's even more on the sort of on the selling and doing. We like to say seller doer a lot. So, and Michael has been referred to obviously as a starchitect. So the phone rang a lot, right? I mean, Michael was in the White House with every president from Reagan through Obama. And that's like, and then you could talk about in pictures with him playing golf with professional golfers. And when you're in that circle, the phone rings. And the team, Michael's team beneath him, were able to deliver great, amazing projects all over the world, but they just didn't have to go out really and do what he did. And so transitioning that has been an evolution. And some of the people, a lot of the people who worked under Michael are still here, and now they're better at doing that. But the firms that we've acquired, again, talented people, great designers, they never had the Michael Graves brand behind them to go out and sell. They had to really hustle, to go and do that. And now with the Michael Graves brand and their ability to network with people and, you know, get the conversations going and get on the list and get the RFPs and negotiate and do the work. It's a perfect marriage of skill set from each side. And that is something was frankly was lacking a little bit on our side. And it was one of the many reasons when you go back to our original strategic plan, the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, right? We one of them was exactly what I just said. And the way to complement that or fix that is really not to go send everybody off to training and say now you know how to sell. I mean that's a fool's mission. It's acquiring the other companies that have that skill set and could benefit from the brand, and that's where you get the 1+1=3 math going on.
Got it. Got it. So I mean, you've been in this industry now for quite a long time, with Michael, and then going through COVID and all of these different things. I mean, what are the current trends that you're kind of seeing in the industry, in 2024? Where are we at with things?
It's a weird time. Interest rates are absolutely slowing down some projects. We have a lot of work we're doing, and the projects are getting shelved or just slow to move. But there's a lot of activity, RFPs. We're seeing a lot overseas, a lot of the international work, mostly in the Middle East. It's just a weird time, and I
Yeah.
would like to see, we see a reduction in interest rates soon. I like to think that that's going to free some of those projects up, and we're going to be super busy, which would be really good. But from a bigger picture in the industry, that you talk AE, so the architecture side and the engineering side, relatively a highly fragmented industry. Now, if you look at the architecture, perhaps even more fragmented, newer to the roll up, the private equity more interested now in our space than in past years, where there's been some consolidation on the engineering side, but we're starting to see more of it on the architecture side. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing a little differently with brand led and very partnership oriented deal structure. And but you're going to see more and more as we go forward over the next few years. And that I think is the biggest change. And I talked to a few people about that subject, and they say multiple people, different conversations said like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the the words private equity acquisition roll ups in architecture would turn the architects off, right? But now they're more receptive to it. Maybe they understand it more. I don't really know what the reason is from their side of it being more receptive. It's some of it is people are finally waking up to I have to do something when I want to retire to monetize the business. And one piece
Yeah.
of advice to anybody listening: don't wait till you're old and ready
Yeah.
to retire. It's not a good time to be thinking about that. Think way sooner than that.
For sure, for sure. I mean, that's the one thing I was going to say about that's always been interesting about Michael Graves is just the global reach that you guys have
Yeah.
had. So, I mean, with whatever's kind of going on in the U.S. economy, I mean, there's always, the whole global, globally known firm. Michael's name really carries a lot of weight, and that's been interesting. So, all right, Joe. So, what potential, disruptions or innovations do you see, impacting the market and the industry going forward?
Well, certainly AI and everything that brings to the table, like real time as it's evolving, and God knows, where what that looks like in 10 years. I wouldn't even begin to try to predict that, but I know from our standpoint, what we've one of the acquisitions we invested in is um, it's a consultancy around Revit. I mean, some of the other softwares as well, but it's primarily Revit to create content, training content, and repeat, libraries, models and things like that that help make a firm more efficient in using Revit. And then also like staff augmentation, jumping in on a project. And, we bought them. Well, they'll continue to sell to the market, like we would normally do with any of our acquisitions that are architecture focused. But a big reason for bringing them in is as we acquire these companies and integrate the companies, they're our key integrator for that platform to make sure that we as a company are taking the advice and taking the lead from an industry subject matter expert and getting us on the same page so we're doing things the same way, and it makes us more efficient and be able to share staff across projects, across offices, etc. So that I think is a major step for us. I still don't believe, and I have no real data to support this other than many conversations I've had with many people over the last several years. And I always ask people to challenge me on this if they disagree. And these are mostly architects I'm talking to. And what I say to them is I don't believe today that the industry is really using Revit to its full capability because it was a hard transition really from AutoCAD to Revit. But when you take that leap and invest in the training and everything, it becomes more powerful to use that tool to its fullest extent. And then of course, AI, which is happening now already, obviously, is going to be that next big thing. And that's maybe I'll be retired by then.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting acquisition that you guys made. And then as I kind of went through, what Revit will do, for you guys and just make it easier, especially across kind of all brands and all of the acquired companies, it was, super interesting. So
Aaron Mahler is the founder. He's an architect, right? And he was working
yeah,
as an architect using Revit, saw all of this and said, geez, there's more, and he loves it, right? So that's
yeah.
really what's got him going to start that company, which is the Parallax team. And we bring him into projects. I bring him in to look at things differently when, maybe I'm not an architect, but when I see a big proposal, I see things that kind of, if I was the buyer on the other side, I'd be, you know, asking some questions, and I bring him in to give a critical look on things. So it's been a real good acquisition for us.
Well, speaking of acquisitions, that's why we're meeting up today on the
Yeah.
podcast to talk about. So let's get into it though. The acquisition strategy of Michael Graves. Like, what has it been?
So going back to the early strategic plans, I talked about like Michael being the star architect and not having the rest of the team to being the seller doer, and how bringing in these other firms helps us because they have that skill, but then we bring them the brand and that helps them and everybody wins. But if you go even further into it, and there's so many components of this, but some of the bigger ones are what I said, and now this one, which is I refer to us as in terms of the type of work we do, I always say like we're a mile wide and an inch deep. So what does that mean? We design basically every single building type you could imagine. But historically, we've not been very deep in any one of those verticals. And Michael's one of his lines is people would ask him, "What's your favorite project?" He would always say the next one, and the next one could be who called or whatever. It wasn't like he doubled down and said these four verticals we're going to focus here. It was like the next cool project, and we'll bring great design to whatever that project is. That's great DNA to have in our bones. When you couple that with some of the other firms that specialize in different building types, right? So our first acquisition was Walden Studio. They were very similar, and it's sometimes referred to as a generalist. They work on multiple building types. But the second one was Jose Carballo here in Jersey, up in Hackensack, who mostly did multifamily. He did some hospitality and some other stuff as well. And I remember talking to an attorney in that space, and they said, "Brilliant acquisition." Why is that? Because nobody in our world would call Michael Graves thinking you're this global firm and you wouldn't even be interested or whatever. And but bringing Jose in, he's a local expert. Has done 50 of these types of buildings, and so now we have that credibility, we have the depth, but we have the subject matter expert. Jose can go in, carry on the conversation, and with with anyone, and bring the work. And he's got that now. He's got the Michael Graves brand to help him with that. You just talk, whether it's more hospitality. We haven't gotten into healthcare yet, but that's an important focus of ours. But higher education, our Winston Salem acquisition, did they do a lot of K through 12 as we do higher ed, which we do in some, but they do a lot. And then, of course, athletics. They do a good amount of athletics work that we've done just a little bit over time, and you just keep going with all of them.
So for like your next acquisitions, are you looking to get into, the healthcare space? I mean, is that something you're actively looking for?
Always, always. And it's just finding the right deal, and it's got to work for us. It's got to work for them, and
Cool. So if we have anybody in that space listening today, please reach out to Joe. That would be a good one.
yeah.
So, I mean, as far as integrating these companies into the Michael Graves firm, I mean, has that been a challenge? Has it been pretty easy? I mean, I know when we've spoken about it in the past, I mean, the Michael Graves name carries a lot of weight, right? So it opens a lot of doors. And, for the most part, people are very excited to come on board and have that as kind of on the top of their business card. But, has there been any challenges in really integrating the teams or?
No, it's been great. The first one, right, is, let me back up a second. My experience and Sean's experience with me at Computer Sciences gave us a lot of the knowledge and know-how of what we needed to do. Slightly different structure than what we're doing here, but a lot of the core principles were the same. And so we had the framework laid out. Here's the game plan. Here's what we're going to do. But let's be honest, the first time you do something, you're still going to figure some things out. And so the first one with Walden, and I told Robbie, like, he was the right person and they were the right team to make them the first one, because several times he'd ask a question, well, what are we going to do about this? I said, well, good question. We have it on our list. We know we need to address that, but I don't have the answer for you yet. We're going to figure that one out. And you can do that on the first one, but by the time you get to the second, third, fourth, fifth, if that's my answer to somebody on the fourth acquisition, then that should be a red flag to them. And after going through the first one, we had a few, let's figure it out. And we locked it down. And from number two forward, it is repeat, repeat, repeat. And to the point where, I'll jump on the first call to sort of set the tone and, see everybody. But really, Sean and now Mark and Justine in HR and Lenny in marketing, Craig, our IT, we inherited an IT guy in the Winston-Salem deal. So he's our director of IT. That's the other thing. We don't do these deals and then like cut jobs to make the deals work. I won't do that. And we have an outsourced IT firm. So, but Craig now represents them. We have, like I say, Justine here in Princeton and Lenny. So that team drives, with folks on the other side, the whole integration process. We have, a 6 or 7 sort of category by category structure. And then in each category, there might be, 15, 20 things to do that just get checked off the list as we knock them off. We got great people. We have a plan. We stick to the plan. If we want to, we always course correct here and there a little bit and just keep refining. So it's gone super smooth. And that's the sort of the operational infrastructure integration, which is, and there's another component of integration which we can jump to, but what I would say again to anybody listening that's doing acquisitions, it's absolutely critical. I mean, maybe there's different industries where it's not, where it's could be a sort of a collection of companies and you roll up all the numbers, but I don't know what that is. In our world, if we're just buying these companies and everybody's doing everything 20 different ways, I'm not sure we've created any value for all of our shareholders. We may have eroded it. So it's really important that same IT platform, same HR payroll platform, same accounting system, everything integrated and doing it one way.
Yeah, I feel like you're a little bit lucky with this, right? Because we work with a lot of different clients at, DBD on their kind of roll up strategy, and it always kind of starts with the capital formation side, which, I've helped, Michael Graves with, in the past. And then the next part of our job is typically the due diligence side, right? And finding, helping
Yeah.
people find those right companies.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing, with Michael Graves that it's just like, you kind of have a waiting list of people or a waiting list of deals that you're just constantly, looking at, which has been great. So it's like the one part of this that I don't have to help you with, at all, which has been, super exciting. But what is the long-term strategy for this? What is the end game in all this?
There's a couple of sort of why on this. For the designers, it's to always be changing the world or the people within that little microcosm of that building or whatever
Yep.
it is that we're designing to create an amazing experience for the owners of that property, for the employees of that property, for the guests of that property, whether they be teachers, students, whether they be guests in a hotel, whatever it is, to do amazing design, right? So this growth structure helps create a much stronger company that enables that, right? For people to have a great
Yep.
career and the company lives on. I made a personal promise to Michael as we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the firm. This would have been like within, a year or less of Michael's passing. And I said to him, wouldn't it be really cool if 50 years from now there's somebody, we were laughing, so we'll both be dead, but maybe the intern we just hired is still working here. Maybe they're 70 something years old and they still work here. Wouldn't it be cool if they are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the firm? And Michael smiled year to year. Make it happen, please make it happen. He really, really wanted to see this firm live on, not for his ego. I mean, there were so many times he could have made different decisions, and I told him, Michael, you can do this, right? And it's in your best financial interest. Well, what are my options? What are my other choices to help the firm? And he really, really, really wanted this to happen. So that's another big reason why. And then also with my job, I mean, I want to grow the company. We want to be big, and I want to create enterprise value. And
Yeah.
I joked earlier with 1 + 1 = 3, but as we bring on these companies, we're creating value for everybody, not just the Michael Graves shareholders, but the shareholders of the company that just came in. That benefits both of us. But each time we do that, it benefits each of the other acquisitions that we brought in, not only because they have, access to different people, different projects as qualifications, but as we build this and we do it right, everybody's equity value in the business goes up for their
Yeah.
share of the business.
No, that's awesome. So I guess can you share maybe like the best acquisition you've done so far and what you learned from that, and then maybe just get into like a mistake that you made in this, or something that you would go back on.
Well, so if I said the best, I'm going to have most people pissed off at me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You don't
So
want
I
to say
will,
the best, but maybe you could give me a real good success story that you guys
yeah,
had, through this process. Because we're trying to get the listeners, to realize here is like, hey, if they're thinking about, running their own acquisition strategy, I mean, definitely, I mean, they can reach out to you or they can
yeah.
reach out to DVD to kind of talk about that, because there's a ton of value in doing this, a ton of opportunity in doing this, right? But what would be like a real success story, a big win from doing this for you?
Yeah, and before that, I would say I'll turn around what you said. First, what was the favorite or the best? What I've said many, many times is there isn't one that we look back and say, "Geez, I wish we didn't do that one." I mean, and that's just the truth. Even though there have been challenges in a couple of the business units, and what I always say is like, and I tell people early in the maybe even pre due diligence, like the early part of the deals is we're trying to get to know you, so because we're going to become partners, and I can't tell you what, I can't tell you when, but I promise you something is going to go off the rails, right?
Yep.
There's going to be something negative. So are we the people together? Can we roll up our sleeves and get things done, right? And that's a big part of diligence. It's like personal due diligence.
I feel like you've told me a couple times where you've had those kind of initial, first calls, first dates, if you will. And you can tell right off the bat, like, even though economically it looks like it would make a lot of sense, but you just see culturally, like, just this is not going to work. Right. So that's probably a good lesson, for people to learn if they're going to think about doing this themselves.
Yep, and it's about this whole business is about people, right? So if that's like your guts telling you something, then maybe you listen. Success stories. I mean, there's a few there. I mean, one of the early business units had some financial struggles, some personal health issues in there, and the financials went off the rail. So I got more involved than I normally would, and we simplified a lot of the business. Now, keep in mind, this whole integration is going on. We're moving them to a different accounting system while all this is going on, which is why we keep refining that process so it doesn't take that long. But they opened up to listen and say, well, we don't. Let's just focus on the 3 4 key levers, and if we just dial in and focus on those things, we'll change the business. And we're still in the middle of it, but we've from where they were at the worst point to where they are today as we're recording this, they've come way out of that, and they're dangerously close to like maybe being well on track by the end of this year and growing really strong into 2025. So you start with something that went wrong, and that's a success story. But what's even better about it is there's another business unit of ours that's struggling now. When they joined us, they won a whole bunch of projects to the point where they couldn't deliver all of them without hiring 5 6 7 8 people. So what they did was, why don't we just, they said to me, why don't we just give the other business unit those projects, let them run. If they need the revenue, we can't. And that is the part of the model. That's what we want to build here. But those guys selflessly just did that. And,
Yeah.
now they're struggling. I told them, like, don't beat yourselves up. Like, we're going to get out of this. And you helped somebody else. Now it's time for others to help you. And that's what a team is all about. So those are some good, but the other ones, that the biggest surprise to me in the whole thing, one was like, private equity knocking on the door, this early in what was my 10-year growth plan. That was a big surprise, a good surprise. But internally, the biggest surprise for me was we do a weekly call for leads and needs, and we want to be real succinct. Like, we have this opportunity coming in. Here's the project, and I need some help in marketing, or I need
Yep.
some help somewhere, or I have people that don't have anything to do, or I need people. Does anybody have a free person to work on this? And it puts all the um, uh, folks from each business unit on the same call every Wednesday morning, and everybody's sharing, and organically, um, without me saying, "Hey, work together on this." They just do it naturally. Like, I mean, I
That's
once had one of
awesome.
the guys call up and say, "Is it okay if I call the other business unit?" I said, "Don't call me and ask permission. Just go do it." Right.
Yeah.
And we've had it happen. It's just worked out where, like, one business unit maybe, for example, didn't do multifamily projects, and but they have a client they did other work with who's now has some land, and they're going to do multifamily, and they might have gone to another architect who does multifamily. Now our partner down there says, well, don't go down the street. We have it in house. We can bring Hackensack office, we can bring the DC office, and together they've got 75 of these projects that they've done. Here's the book. Like, let's get a meeting. And then one of the partners will go down to that other business unit, sit with them, help them, meet with the client, and get work that way. And that is 1 + 1 = 5 now, right? Like, this is why we're doing what we're doing in the growth strategy, is to get these types of synergies happening.
All right, Joe. So if anybody was looking to kind of start running their own roll up strategy like this, what kind of advice would you give them?
Okay, so probably a few things. In general, like I think I mentioned earlier, we're in a people business, so you got to make sure you're putting the right people together that are aligned towards the same goals and mission. Having the right team in place. I've mentioned earlier, I've got the COO, the CFO. We brought in a marketing person in Lenny, and others. So we've invested in those people, before we really could afford it, right? Because if we keep going, then it's like a then what? And we're trying to catch up with a mess. So really making sure you got the right infrastructure. Deal structure is critically important. Like, it's pointless to try to do a deal where I win and you lose, right? There's enough victory in all of this for everybody to share. So, not being greedy I mean, just don't be a pig about it, and find a good structure that everybody wins on. And the team is like internal and external, right? So I talked about the internal. Externally, we have our IT provider. Intron. We have our PEO, Extensis, our outside accountants, Citrin Cooperman. We outside general counsel. We use Katsky Corins. We use in New York. So getting the right people on the team, that hub and spoke, right? Like outsource what you can and keep your core, internal is important. And then like the best advice I always tell people. So then I'll throw my friend's name out, Bill Capuzzi, good friend of mine, and I asked him to give me a critique, look at my strategy, and the best advice he gave me was to go find a banker and a bank that could kind of get me started. We were too small for private equity at the time, and then that's when I reached out to you, and I felt bad for blowing you off when you allegedly first came up and said you wanted to introduce yourself to me. But all kidding aside, I had talked to a bunch of banks because if I'm not mistaken, you were in transition at the moment. And then when I finally got you on the phone, you were about to land, and
Yep.
we got going. And you really helped more than anyone. Help You wanted to figure out and understand what I was doing and what I needed in order to be able to convert that to, I guess, the way you would present it inside the bank to get them to understand
Yep.
what we wanted to do. And it's been, a great success. Um, and I totally appreciate that. Without you, I've said I had you at the holiday party, right? Without you, we couldn't have gotten ourselves off the ground, and totally appreciate that. And that's just the follow up, always, answering the phone and being available to just kick ideas around. We probably have, for every phone call that leads to something, we've had about 50 of them that we're just kicking ideas around, right? So
Phone calls, text messages, yeah, lunch and dinner meetings, and as things continue with Michael Graves, I'm so excited to be a part of it, and to be, I feel like in a weird way I've been part of the whole growth story. It's just been cool to watch, and it's just been such a pleasure. And I mean, I guess the thing that's different, right, is a lot of companies don't have that internal team that you guys have, right? And it's really tough for companies to continue to run and do what they do to bring money in, right, while trying to you know do these acquisitions and everything. And that's why it's so important to have that external team, right? That's what we always tell people, at DBD. It's like, hey, you need to run your everyday business. Money has to keep coming in, right? You need to hire somebody from the outside to really help execute on these strategies.
it may be one of the most important nuggets that comes out of this for a listener. Is somebody who's running their business as an architect that wants to do this. I'm the three of us, Sean, Mark, and I are not architects. Right? We are business people. We're focused on the business side of things. And I did meet with a firm, within the last year or so, and they were sort of picking my brain on this. And I did tell them, be careful you don't bite off more than you can handle, because they were thinking that they were going to sort of follow the same script, but without somebody like me, who's a finance guy, without Sean, without Mark, like architects trying to do it. And I said, be really careful, because it's not easy. And we sit here and we talk, and we say how great it is. We post in LinkedIn and everything's, and it is. I mean, it's great growth, but make no mistake, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, and a lot of course correction and things. And so I caution anyone to make sure you really buttoned up. It's why I go back to what I said earlier. I hired Sean, Mark, Lenny, even Craig. I mean, he was with us. We inherited Craig. But those three hires I made before, if you looked at our budget on paper, can we afford to make this hire? The answer would have been no every single time, right? But then I said to myself, well, then what? What if we don't hire them and we keep doing these acquisitions? Then what? Big problem.
So, yeah, thanks for everything today, Joe. This has been really, really, really insightful. So, in what ways can other firms collaborate with Michael Graves and Associates?
Well, I mean, for whatever 60 years or so now, we've always collaborated with other firms to go get work, and that's like the key ingredient in this whole thing is the collaborative nature of architects to begin with. So we're always open to partnering if we can help somebody. For those who are looking to transition their firm for the bigger picture going forward, we're always looking. There's anywhere from 2 to 8 deals in the pipeline at all times. They come and go, and we close some. So we're always looking. And if somebody has a question, they want some advice or bounce something off, I'm always open for those conversations. Me helping somebody doesn't, you know, make me lose my competitive advantage. What comes around goes around. So I'm always happy to help someone that can use some help.
For sure. And so are there any, outside of you said, like the hospital industry, the medical,
The health
industry,
thing.
outside of that vertical, is there, any other ones that you're looking to really, get in touch with? Or the other question I would say, is there any geographies that you're looking for to fill in as well?
Yeah, so basically all of the industries. I mean, there's really nothing that I can think of off the top of my head that we're not really, we don't have something in it. Even like in, the industrial buildings, we have some of them, and they may not all be on our website, but every vertical. The reason I mentioned healthcare is because that's the one where really have the least amount of critical mass. So we're looking at all verticals. Would we right now today, multifamily, in the east, in the northeast, where we have a big presence, we might slow that down a little bit just based on conditions, but that'd probably be the only thing to really hesitate. But all the other industries, and then we're really continental U.S. We're looking at one in Canada with a U.S. presence at the moment. Other parts of the world, I mean, maybe, but at the moment, there's just so much we can do right here. So that's our focus, and we want to get a real national footprint in the continental U.S. And we're mostly
Very
on the East Coast right now with a little Texas. We have a couple people here and there throughout, but uh, not yet a big presence like from the West Coast coming back. But we're working on it. We have a few out there.
Well, I've been very lucky to, be friends with you for so long and work with the Michael Graves teams, and help them with their, acquisition and roll up strategy over the past couple of years. DBD has been actively working with many different clients on their roll up strategy, from the formation of capital to helping with the due diligence process. You know, I really have enjoyed working with you these years, Joe, and thank you so much for joining us today. If there's anything else like from a key takeaway, what would you want listeners to really take away from this conversation?
That's a good question. I mean, I go back to this whole thing. It just come back to people, and even you go into design. Like Michael designed things with the human in mind, the person. Right? I talk about the right deals and integrating. It's all about people. And it goes back to relationships, with all of our third party and all back to, you and I, right? And a great relationship with you is what helped us get off the ground on this thing. So, you know, people and relationships is maybe the most important thing. It leads to good deals, to fair deals. You don't want to beat somebody for that extra couple of bucks. Like what no real point in that. So I think, that would be one of the most important, if not the most.
Now, where can the audience follow you and get in touch with you?
Well, so I'm on LinkedIn, and we have the Michael Graves site, if you will. I'm going to sound old right now. On LinkedIn, we have our page on LinkedIn and Instagram, and then michaelgraves.com is our homepage, and our contact info is on there. I just have one phone number. I think it's on there, and my email address. No
Very cool.
landline or anything, so I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Joe, and we look forward to working with you throughout the future.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you
All right.
every day. Thank you.
Thank you.